Maybe. I'm just going to start. Hopefully, this is actually streaming. Okay, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know, my name is Karen. I am one of the co-hosts of the Incoherent Fangirl podcast, which is a podcast where we generally talk all things fandom, but most of the time it is very bookish because we are very bookish people. And I am very excited today to be joined by some excellent authors who are here to help celebrate Pride with me. So first off, we've got Amber D. Lewis, pronouns she, her. She is a highly combustible combination of caffeine, mismatched coffee mugs, and shiny things. In her spare time, and quite frankly, when she's supposed to be doing other things, she writes fantasy and other stories. We have DOMINIC LIM, pronouns he, him, whose debut novel, All the Right Notes, has been named a 2023 Best Book by USA Today, Harper's Bazaar, Goodreads, BookRiot, Library Journal, Booklist, and Entertainment Weekly, who called it a swoony, joyful rom-com to take readers into a love story worthy of a Broadway stage, which is very relevant since we just had the Tony Awards, so very exciting there. Lambda literary fellow Jen St. Jude, pronouns they, them, grew up in New Hampshire apple orchards and now lives in Chicago with their wife, daughter, and dog. Their debut YA novel, If Tomorrow Doesn't Come, was published by Bloomsbury Children's and Penguin Random House in 2023. And finally, we have Kara Jorgensen, also they, them, is a queer, non-binary, neurodivergent oddball with a penchant for all things antiquated, morbid, or just plain strange. A lover of history and science, Kara melds their passions through their 9, going on 10 historical paranormal books, and graduated in 2016 with an MFA in creative and professional writing. Welcome, everybody, to this very last minute, I feel like, Pride celebration. Very grateful to have y'all with me. And I guess we'll just dive in and see where things go. So the first question I have is, can you tell me what Pride means to you specifically and how you incorporate that into your writing? And we'll start with Amber.
I guess to me, it kind of means, the community and like having the other people that are not always necessarily like me, but like growing up in the very conservative South, in, very religious circles, that was not a thing. And so, like, I didn't really learn a lot about myself until I got into adulthood and kind of broke out of that bubble. And so pride to me is just having that community of people to go to and to get that support and to kind of see the things in myself that I always grew up that were like other, and seeing that it's not other, and just that whole community behind it. And I definitely put that into my writing, definitely through like the found family type theme. I actually heard someone say one time that found family is a very queer trope. And well, obviously, it can be used outside of queer circles. Definitely within my books and my writing, that found family aspect of just we accept you as you are, and just that love and acceptance, that community feel is definitely a big part of my writing and my stories.
Hey, Dom, you want to share?
Yeah, pride to me, let's see, I think it means, first of all, visibility and celebration. Growing up, I went to Oberlin College, and I remember the first like major pride celebration I went to was the March in Washington, and this was back, I'm much older than all of you guys. This was in the early 90s, and I remember what a huge deal it was to see so many people from across the nation getting together to celebrate the fact that they were LGB LGB at the time. We didn't have LGBT or queer. Um, and now, unfortunately, in the past couple of years, Pride has, for me, increasingly been incorporating the traditional aspect of protest and fighting, because because as we know, just it's been really bad these past few years. So whereas like I felt like we were celebrating a lot, and then all of a sudden it began to backslide. So unfortunately, there is that more of that fighting back aspect to Pride that's been more important for me in these past few years. And the way that I have it in my books is more of the celebration part of it and the visibility, because in my books, the characters are queer, and it's not, I mean, obviously, obviously it's an important part of the book because it's queer romance, but it's not about being queer. The main issues are not about being at the closet. It's not about trauma. It's not about oppression. They are about just the everyday normal romance tropes that we all get to go through. So seen through a queer lens, obviously, but just I always want all my books to have that, element of we're here, we're queer, and like period. Like just get used to I can't believe I just said that. I am literally a cliche. But that's
it's a
what it
cliche
is.
for a reason,
Yeah, it's
though,
a cliche
so.
for a reason.
Awesome. Jen?
Yeah, I think I'm just echoing both of you, but I think for me, pride is the opposite of shame. And, it's permission to like be who you are without apology, which is still something I struggle with, even as an adult, even as someone who's out. Like, I feel like I've carefully carved my life in a way where most of the time I'm interacting with queer people. And then there's like situations where that's not the case. And I feel suddenly small, and it's this oscillation between like the life I've built for myself, my found family, the people that I trust and can be myself around. And then, even if it's just like the comment section, sometimes I'll like, very foolishly click on the comments on what I think is a beautiful article about like maybe a trans youth like competing in sports or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. I love it so much. It makes me so happy and it makes me feel seen. And then I click on the comments and I'm like reminded that the carefully curated world I've built is not most of the world and not most of people's experience, and we're still up against so much a lot of the time. So for me, pride is just like taking all the shame that I still have about who I am and like who I'm trying to be and figure myself out and like to be brave in that, because I think I'm writing YA and I feel all the time like I'm still going through a lot of the things I think young people are. So every time I don't feel like being brave or feel like self-loathing or like confused or whatever, like I try to think of the kids and like young adults reading my book and what I would say to them. And I try to say that to myself. And it's like a lot easier that way. So I feel like the stories I'm writing make me braver, and the people who read my books and like comment on them and love them make me braver too. So it's really special.
As a baby queer myself, I very recently came out in 2020, first to myself and then to all my friends. And reading your books, and specifically YA books in the queer setting, definitely do what you say you're trying to do, is create a space for us. So you're doing great. Kara?
So, I think for me, Pride tends to be sort of this month where it's like, okay, we've always existed. I like the idea that it's kind of a reminder that there's queer history, that there is a past, that, we also have our present day, obviously celebrating, and having to look to the future and make sure that we still preserve what we have now and what we lost in the past when we had backslides. So I tend to think of Pride as like almost a month where I think that I'm more meditative, where I tend to think more, like I said, about the people who came before and the people who will hopefully come after. That's probably because I write historical fiction and I write like historical fantasy that is, based in reality. So I do a lot of research on like queer history. So that's important to me to make sure that's incorporated into my writing as well, because I feel like when I was younger, I felt very adrift, that I'm like, am I the only person who's ever gone through this? Obviously not, but I didn't have community. And, looking to the past before I had those people in my life made it a lot easier when I realized that there were other people who came before who did make it, who did have good lives. And I think, even writing queer, historical books, I want to make sure these characters have happy endings and, that it's not, like I think Dom said, not all doom and gloom and, misery or, dealing with closetedness as much. I want to make sure that it's, that my readers see that in the past people still were happy, even if it was, in the margins, which kept them safer.
I love that aspect. I never really thought about a queer story in a historical setting and how different that would be for a contemporary. So I love what you said about that because we have always existed and we're going to continue to exist. And it's nice to be able to see that in a good light in a historical. Okay, so next question. What is your favorite thing about writing queer stories? And is there anything you hope that readers, especially queer youth, take away from them? We'll start with Dom.
Yeah, so I think my favorite thing about writing queer stories is number one, the stories are easy for me to write because it's my own lived experience. I don't have to do so much research. I don't write historical, thank God, Kara, because that's always always so impressed by that. But no, I live in the here and now, so like I can just take the details and go. But also, I think really the main thing that I enjoy about writing queer fiction is the knowing that the inevitable product will end up in the hands of someone who in some way feels seen. Especially for me, as I write, my characters are queer and people of color, that these communities are so often underrepresented in fiction. And it's been such a great joy to receive feedback from readers who have been like, this is the first time I've ever seen myself as a, queer Filipino or whatever, you know. So that to me has been such a gift.
Jen, how about you?
Yeah, probably a very similar answer, but I think the readers are by far the best part. I wrote my book not really thinking it would get published. It took me 10 years to write and it was just this project I felt like I had put so much time in and increasingly felt like I didn't want to give up on it and obviously pursued traditional publishing. But there was such a long time where I was writing it and didn't think anyone would ever read it. So it's been a cool and strange and weird and like confusing experience of actually people read it. But it's so beautiful. Like I like to think, like, listen, you're going to publish a book, not everyone's going to like it. And I sort of think about it like there's two teams of people, like one who don't really like it or don't care about it, whatever. And then there's the people who do. And every time I'm tempted to doubt myself or be like, oh, like I got this bad review or, like it didn't win an award or I'm not on this list, whatever. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't really care about that team. It's like, I want to be on this team, like the people who like it and see it and like get what I was trying to do. And like, those are my people, So I definitely didn't set out to please people or, win a bunch of awards or get on lists. And it's hard when you start publishing, you get like tempted to be pulled into these things of like, oh, I want to be validated in this way. But ultimately, like, I don't care. Like, what I care about is those people who do like it and feel seen by it, like Dominic said. And like, it's just like this gift that I never thought I would get in my life because I never thought I would actually publish it. So to see it in the world, have people actually reading it like all over the world is just so beyond my expectation and comprehension and what I ever thought would be possible for this story. So it's been really, I don't know, it's like everything I thought I wanted, it's been that and more. So I just feel really, really lucky. And I don't know how many books I'm going to publish, but no matter what happens next, like I'm just so happy I had this experience. And every reader who's picked up my book or tried it, even if they didn't like it, like I'm just so grateful.
Sarah?
So with writing, queer stories and queer fiction, I think my big thing is that I really just enjoy the freedom of it. The fact that, I used to think that I had to write like, you know, like male female romance or like allo cis het romance, and you know, being someone who is none of those things, I really enjoy the fact that with queer stories, I can, you know, have a character who's asexual, and that could be just part of their character. It doesn't have to be like the whole story. Or, you know, I can have a character who's in a, you know, cis trans relationship who is set back in the 1800s, and it's still realistic, and it's still, you know, a thing that definitely happened, even if we don't have, you know, verbatim documentation. You know, I know these people existed. Research has shown these people existed, and it's really fun to me to be able to be like, oh, you know, the people who are super conservative, who are like, oh, you know, gay people popped up in like, you know, 1960. It's nice to be able to be like, no, and be able to write those stories of people from the past. And actually, you know, I like writing queer stories to be spiteful, almost at some point. My one book that I wrote a couple years ago, Kinship and Kindness, has like a trans character in the 1800s, and I actually put a further reading section at the back of the book because I was like, let's make sure that it's clear that I've done the research. I mean, even if we all know it, you know, it's fun to be able to do that. And you know, writing queer stories too, I often think about the fact that we had queer stories back in the, you know, 20s and 30s during the silent movie era, and how we lost so much of that due to backsliding right before World War II and afterwards. You know, so I kind of like to, you know, recapture that by writing, you know, historicals and queer stories set in the past. And yeah, for queer youth, because I think that was part of the question initially, was just, you know, if you don't like, if you're worried right now about what's going on, just know that we've been around for a long time. We've, you know, been through adversity and have come out the other side, and, you know, people have paved the way for you, and hopefully you'll pave the way going forward for others. So that's what I always kind of hope that people take away when reading, you know, queer stories, especially kids.
I really love what you said about spite because I live and thrive on being spiteful and petty. Um, it is what drives me in life, so I very much appreciate that. Amber?
Well, since I write fantasy, I get the advantage of being able to create my own world. So I get to create queer normative worlds. And I think that's one of my favorite things about writing fantasy. And anyone who has read my books will know that they start off very subtly queer. And by the time you get to my most recent books, it's very much, it's too late. You're there. You're in a very queer normative world. Everybody is gay. Like, and it's just, it's the norm and no one questions it. I was able to create countries where polyamory was just as normal as monogamous relationships. And I was able to create like ceremonies and traditions that revolve around, you know, the queerness of different characters, and no one blinks an eye when the prince starts dating, you know, his guard. And there are tons of asexual characters just all across the ace spectrum throughout my stories, and no one even really questions it. It's just they present themselves as who they are, and it's just people go on about their day. And of course, there are always going to be haters. So occasionally throughout my stories, you do get the haters, but those are few and far between. And the support that people get, it's just, it's very positive, and it's just a very warm atmosphere. And it's just kind of goes back to that whole idea of community. And when people read my book, I want them to see themselves in my characters, because there's a whole different, like, I cram as much rep in there as possible. Like, there's just all across the whole rainbow, and I just really want people to look at it and go, I'm not alone, that's me, I'm normal, this is a normal thing. And just to, you know, be able to read my books and feel comfortable in that queer normative world and realize, you know what, it doesn't matter if there are haters out there, because, you know, we're here and we're queer, and that is okay.
It's like your books are the fictional version of how Jen has curated their life to be a queer normative space. And I love that so much because it it really sucks to be in a society that thinks of us as like the outsiders. And so I love being able to see from all of your stories that there are spaces where where it can just be normal. And that's great. Um, and then my last prepared question. We'll see how this goes. Are there any queer characters or queer media that you particularly love or resonate with? We'll start with Jen.
Yes, my favorite queer representation over the past few years is the show Yellow Jackets, which is a little bit gory, but it's so weird and cool and creepy, and everybody's a little bit morally gray because they're trying to survive. If you don't know about Yellow Jackets, it's about a girls soccer team who's going to nationals, but their plane crashes in this creepy woods, I think in Canada, and they're forced to try to survive over a couple of seasons, and it's very gay, it's very dark, it's very creepy, and it's very funny. The cast is great. And I think it's so unique in that it speaks to, like, yes, coming out stories are so important, and there's some like really beautiful queer representation that made me cry. But it's also just weird and creepy. And my brother's also gay, thank God. And we often talk about, he was like, this is like if you and I made a show, you would be like, hey, let's make it about women soccer players. And I would be like, cool, and also cannibalism. Like, so the show very much to me just feels like this vibe of my brother and I, and so it's been my favorite. And I just love that it's this range of like sincerity and humor and darkness and creepiness, and I'm very hopeful for the show's future. I feel like they know what they're doing, but we'll see. There's so many questions around the plot and what's happening, and I think they're filming season 3 now, so I'm very excited about that.
That's been on my list forever, so I'm very excited to hear such a glowing recommendation.
That's a great show.
Kara.
I mean, right now, I think my favorite like queer character right now is probably Stede Bonnet from Our Flag Means Death. I mean, for me, I'm an autistic person, so when I look at Stede, a lot of what I see with him is like an autistic coded character. You know, he's so sincere and he's trying so hard and he's trying his best, and he just keeps missing the mark, like in season 1, like completely doesn't get what's going on half the time. But I love the fact that he is just like such a sweet, dorky character, and that his community ends up loving him once they sort of realize like what he's trying to do, and that he actually is being sincere, and that it's not a trap. We actually love you. You know, I'm also a professor who teaches a lot of freshmen, and he has that vibe of like, I'm the teacher, these are my students that I'm trying to like corral when it comes to his crew. So I don't know, I heavily relate. Plus he's just sort of on that nice little gender goals line for me as a non-binary, slightly masked person. So, but yeah, probably Stede.
Amber.
Okay, so first I want to point out that from the moment I read that was a question, I immediately forgot every piece of queer media I have ever experienced. So I'm
You
just going
should
to throw
be used
that
to
out there.
that from me. Like,
I should be. I
You
like
should
panicked messaged one of my friends. I'm like, what do I say? So anyhow, I have 2 answers to this. One is slightly unhinged, but I think a lot of people are really going to connect with it. And that is Li Shang from Mulan, because that man is a bisexual king and you cannot convince me otherwise. But that
Yep.
movie came out when I was in like, I think 6th, 7th grade, and I watched that on a loop. And it always fascinated me as, you know, a emerging teen, that there was this man that had clearly fallen in love with another man. Because let's face it, all the way throughout, you know, the whole montage where they're singing, there was attraction there, and you cannot convince me otherwise. And he almost seemed disappointed when Mulan was a woman. But me, little bisexual me, not even really realizing that I was bisexual yet, like that kind of has stuck with me throughout my entire like teen years and into my adulthood, when I finally got around to the point of, you know, reading books. And that leads me to my second like actual queer media. And that's back a few years when I was actually like reading a lot of, started really seeking out and reading queer books and just kind of coming terms to everything with myself. And during that process, I read Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by the amazing Becky Albertalli. And of course, immediately followed it up by watching the movie. And just that whole idea of why is straight the default? Like, that just immediately resonated with me. And it was like, why is straight the default? And like from that point on, like, you know, it's no longer the default. Like, so that's like something. And I don't think that there's a single person, queer person out there who doesn't at least know about the book, even if you haven't read it. And like you see on the front of like every YA book, you know, for fans of Becky Oliver Tully, you know. And so, you know, that's a piece of queer media that like I'll just go back and read it, and my kid's reading the book right now, and it's just I love it.
Yeah. Dom, how about you?
So I have two. I want to say two, sorry. And they're so different. One is the movie that came out on Hulu last year, or no, I think it's 2 years now. Fire Island with Joel Kim Booster and Bowen Yang. And not only is it a great movie and is it sort of based on a Jane Austen book, but also that it's a movie that normalizes queer Asian sexiness. Because when I was growing up, we were so far away from anything that was Asian and sexy male, Asian male and sexy, let alone queer Asian male and sexy. So that was huge for me. And I'm one of the biggest comic book fans on the planet. X-Men 97, and the creator said that this was fully intended to be a queer scene when Morph turns into Jean Grey to tell Wolverine that they love Wolverine. And that was fully intended to be a queer scene. And that was so awesome. You know, as a kid, I read so many comic books. Well, I still read so many comics books. Who am I kidding? Because it is, you know, it is a metaphor for being an outsider, for being queer, for being other. And there are now so many queer characters in the in the Marvel and the DC universes that every time they come out with like a Pride compilation, like there's not enough room to like do the stories of all the different queer characters because there are so many now. It's just amazing.
Yes, I love all these answers so much. They make my little heart happy. And I had something that popped into my head while Amber was talking, and now I have completely lost it because that's how my brain works. But I will say, Dom, you are leading the way for, you know, people realizing that Asian men are really, really hot. Like you're writing these stories. I mean, obviously we have help from Simu Liu, who headlines a Marvel movie, is hot as hell,
Yeah,
and is obviously an Asian male. So the world's coming around to us.
they're coming around.
We've known for a while,
Yeah,
but the
yeah.
world's starting to figure it out. Okay, so speaking of every piece of media that you've ever consumed leaving your brain, I'm going to ask this question that I did not prepare any of you for, but it's a fun one that we always ask on my podcast. We have a segment which we call Fictional Boyfriend of the Week, and we pick a character that we are absolutely enamored with that week to be kind of like our love interest for that week, because why not? Fictional men are better. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a boyfriend. I have had a fictional granny in the past. I've picked a fictional found family in the past. So I would love to know, are there any characters other than those you've already mentioned that you are just really loving right now that you want to share with other people? We'll start with Kara.
So I recently read Cat Sebastian's We Could Be So Good, and I'm gonna say Nick from that story. Nick is a reporter, and he's sort of closeted. It's set in the I think 50s or late 50s, early 60s. But I just love Nick so much. He like loves Andy, who's the other character, and he makes him soup and takes care of him. And when Andy wants to capture this cat that roams around the apartment building, Nick goes outside and he catches the cat and brings him in. He's like, now you're a house cat, you know, you're Andy's cat, you know. So I just love Nick for being willing to go above and beyond as a, you know, boyfriend, husband, partner. And I just love him to pieces.
I love that. Amber, how about you? I know you're already mad at
I,
me.
ne-
I
I
know you're
never
already
have
mad.
an answer to this question. I never do. Uh, I honestly, I don't know. Like what have I even been reading? I've been reading a lot of fan fiction, honestly. I'm gonna be honest with you. Been reading a lot of fan fiction. So like I've just honestly immediately forgotten. The only book that I've read recently that wasn't YA, because I always feel weird saying, a YA character is like, that's just weird, was Dom's book. So like that was a really good book. But like I don't know. There's too many. I can't just pick one.
In
We're just gonna pick them all. I pick them all.
in my brain, no matter what age the character is canonically, regardless of whether or not it's stated, they are my age. Like I don't, that's just how my brain works. I'm like, obviously everybody is in their 30s. I'm reading a YA book, but everybody's in their 30s. It's fine.
Ooh,
That's how I
you know what?
justify everything.
I'm gonna change it. I'll just say my character from my own book. I'll just say Bash from my book that's coming out soon. Like I'll just pick him because he's perfect. So
He is morally gray and perfection. I
so
love
I'll just pick him because it's easy.
him. Dom, how about you?
Oh God, I can't. Okay, can we skip me? Trying to think.
If
Well,
Jen's
I mean,
ready.
if like I could say every single older brother on Bridgerton is number one probably for me right now because I just finished watching the first half of the latest season. And they're pretty damn hot. I know that's not a book, but I mean it
It
comes from a
counts.
book.
It's a
Yeah,
fictional character.
all right. But I guess that's mine. But also, can I say fictional best friend? Because I'm
Yeah.
reading Rebecca Weatherspoon's Her Good Side right now, and the MC of that book is like, and her entire family, her two moms are like NBA people. I'm like, I wish she was my best friend.
Oh, I love that. We love a
Yeah,
fictional bestie.
yeah, she would be my fictional bestie.
All right, Jen, how about you?
I'm reading my friend's book that's coming out, I think next year, May 2025. And this is for y'all, Our Flag Means Death fans, because it's about three queer teens who sneak onto a smuggler's boat to try to rescue multiple people that they care about in Maine. And it's by L.T. Thompson. I don't want to spoil the title because it hasn't been announced yet, but it is so, so good. It stars three kind of third person main character POV. One is this trans guy named Cass and one is this very strict but trying to let her hair down lesbian Remy, and Finn, who's this Irish lesbian who is in love with Remy, of course, and they're best friends and they're on this journey. And I just keep texting my friend, like, I keep alternating which character I'm most like so enamored with. They're just all my favorite. It is such a good book. It's coming out very soon, and I wish I could tell you the title, but just look up in
Is
about a
it
few weeks. You can
See it
go.
soon.
is it
See it soon.
contemporary YA or historical YA?
It's historical. It's set in the 1800s,
Okay.
and I just keep like, even if this wasn't my close friend writing it, it's like my favorite kind of writing, my favorite kind of characters. The story is
Wow.
so good, and I just feel like everyone's gonna love it. So I will DM you the name secretly, and hopefully it'll be announced soon. But don't feel like it's my place. But it's such a good book, and I'm just like, in terms of found family, I'm like, I just want to be all of their friends. So it's great.
I love that when you can resonate with so many of the different main characters and just, it's the best. So if anybody in the audience has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I have not seen any, but I don't know how laggy the chat is based on when we're talking. So I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to make stuff up now because that was all of my preparation. I'm very good at preparation, obviously. So let's see. Let's get into like writing as a craft. Because I know that there are some aspiring writers in the audience. What is something that really helps you develop your story that you feel like it maybe isn't talked about as much? And I think we're at Amber.
Um, I'm probably about the worst person to ask this because I am very much a pantser and I just dive into a story completely blind. And like my first book, I was like halfway through before I knew really where we were going with it. And it ended up turning into a whole like 7 book series. But I guess that's just my advice. Just jump in and see where something goes. Cause sometimes you burn out and it doesn't go anywhere and it just becomes, a work in progress that's sitting over to the side. And sometimes it turns into something amazing, but you'll never know if you don't at least try and just get it out. And you can always go back and rework it later. So just dump the thoughts out, get them out there, go back, rework them, and see what you can do with it.
I love that.
Uh,
Dom, how about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite of you, Amber. Like I tried to I tried to pants it once. It was just not like I was just writing into a vacuum. Like the words didn't mean any sense. So I'm a hardcore plotter, an outliner, but I think my advice would be if you are more of a plotter, um, let your pants down sometime. That doesn't make sense. Wait. Um, what I'm trying to say is, as you're plotting and as you're writing through your outline, let your characters go the way that they need to go. And don't be afraid, like, if you're like, oh no, if I keep writing it this way, it's gonna veer way off the outline. Like, if that's what your character, you need to go that direction. I hate to break it to you. And then you just need to redo your outline. That's a thing. And because I faced this with Karaoke Queen, where I had this really hard, like, I was dead set on this outline, and the characters kept saying we shouldn't be doing that, and I wasn't listening because I needed to get through the book. And by the time I got to the end of the book, like, nothing worked because they all were just, it was so plot driven, like, and it wasn't character driven. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is listen to your characters, because at the end of the day, you don't want a purely plot driven book, right? You want the story to be driven by the characters. And if they're driving you, just let them drive you.
It's almost like the idea of, like, I don't know, it's a phrase that I heard recently-ish, kill your darlings. Like, don't be precious
Mhm.
with certain things, kind of,
Yeah.
like you said, let the story drive itself. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, because we can, I think humans are kind of hardwired to like want to stick to certain things.
Mhm.
People who aren't neurodivergent generally will want to stick to certain things, and I think that's great advice, is to kind of let things flow as you can.
It's not easy, but yeah.
Yeah.
For me at
How
least.
about you, Jen?
Yeah, I think I'm like a pantser plotter combination, just to create a hybrid here. But I think for me with writing is like I'm a slow writer. I'm I don't know. I have a 2 book deal, which is amazing. I'm writing a second book, but that I don't know what's going to happen after that. It might be the last book I ever write. And again, with my first book, I never intended necessarily to publish it, though it's amazing that came to pass. But I think my whole like thought process is like, for better or worse, like if this is the one chance you get to have someone pay attention to what you're writing, like what do you actually want to say, and really sit with that. And like, because again, I could write a million books, but people only have limited resources of time and emotional energy, and there's so many books in the world. And so I think I'm just like, what do I actually really feel like I need to say? And I felt like for a long time, everything in my first book was everything I ever wanted to say to the world. But then some time passed and I became a different person and I had some new things to say, which is really cool. But that took me a minute. And I struggle because I'm like, I don't have any ideas for future books. But then I also just trust that I'm going to change and I'm going to become a new person, and hopefully I'll have different things to say soon. So I think that's kind of like my thing, is just say everything you really want to say, and that can be in a very like literal way or in just like a have fun way or whatever, way you're trying to communicate to the world. But yeah, it's it's challenging, I think, to put yourself out there like that because it is kind of brutal. You get a lot of like feedback from people you don't know, but I'm like, at the end of the day, if this is all that I get to say in my whole life, like I want it to be what I want it to be. And similar to, I think, Dominic, like I actually I've tried so hard for any writers to like follow Save the Cat, and I know that's like a very popular, plotting tool, and my brain is like, I don't understand it. And I have used it for pacing when it comes to editing, of like with my first book, when I went out to a bunch of editors, they all rejected it, and I went back and I literally went through on a Kindle, like, right, okay, this is like 25%, what should be happening? This is 33%, what should be happening? And so I have used it for editing, but when it comes to drafting, it just makes me feel so confused. But there's this author, K.M. Wieland, who, listen, grain of salt, she uses some really outdated, problematic references. Like there is like She Who Must Not Be Named in it, but I just think those books resonate with me more. Like there's one that's just about character arc, and so her whole thing is like, okay, the first half of the book is this character believing a lie about the world and about themselves, whether it's like, I don't deserve to be alive, or no one's ever going to love me, or being individuals better than being part of a team. And then the midpoint is this shift in them learning that's maybe not true, but they keep acting in a way where like they think it's true, but they're like trying to fight against it. And the second half of the book is them learning the truth of the world, of like, I'm not better alone, and people can love me, and I do deserve to be alive. And that's so simple, but that's been like the big piece for me with drafting now, is just like how I'm structuring my book, how I'm thinking about my characters. I think my books are very character driven, so to plot it out with the character in mind feels much easier than like plot beats and all those things that a lot of people go by. So
Kara?
I mean, I think my big thing with writing is that there's no one way to do it. I just feel like a lot of times, especially when you're a young writer, so many people say like you have to fast draft, or you have to outline, or you shouldn't outline, or you should, do this or that. And I get rule paralysis. So like back when I was doing my MFA, I had a professor who was like, your characters can't smile, they can't laugh, and they can't, I forget what the other thing was. And I remember I just completely froze for the whole semester and handed in work I had written previously because my brain just was like, no, I can't deal. So kind of going off like what Jen said, there are plenty of ways to do this. Do the way that works for you. And I think part of the process of becoming a better writer is also realizing what that process is and sort of what works best for your brain. Like I used to just be a pantser, and at this point I'm much more of I think they call it a gardener, where you're like in between plotter and pantser, where I like to have note cards and an outline that I do sort of act by act. So I don't know the whole thing. I sort of just work a chunk at a time. And that process works for me. I also edit as I go, which I know is like a sin for for some people, but I have to edit as I go, because if it's a mess at the end, I will just throw it in the trash and never look at it again. So, basically if you're a new writer, experiment with things, figure out what works best for you, and sort of know yourself. Because if you know your own personality and you're like, yeah, I'm not into that, work with the process that sort of is conducive to your personality.
I love all of this advice, and I am taking it very seriously because I am very stuck right now. So thank y'all. So we do have a couple questions. This one I really like. If you were to write a queer story outside of your usual genre, what genre would you pick? We're gonna start with Dom.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's an easy question because I really, really want to write like a speculative fiction or fantasy thriller sci-fi thingy. Not
So everything except what you currently write.
yeah, and YA too, why not?
I love this answer.
But
Jen,
it's
how
like
about
totally
you?
true.
That's fair. Jen, how about you?
It's funny because I'm like, my first book was kind of speculative contemporary question mark. But my next one's sort of like speculative historical question mark. I don't know what I'm doing. But I think outside of that, I think I would like to write new adult, which I know is not a genre, but I think I already feel like I'm kind of on the cusp of YA and adult, which has historically been a problem for me with publishing. but I think new adult's gonna have a moment. There's a new imprint, which is, I don't know, but I think people want it. So I think that age range of like 18 to 30 really deserves some thought. It's like a whole new coming of age, especially for queer people, especially for people who never got the chance to explore their identity. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable in the genres that I'm in, but in terms of age group, I would be excited to age up a bit.
Kara?
So I have kind of two very disparate genres I would like to work in, because currently I work in mostly like historical, paranormal, queer romances. And I would really love one day to do like an epic fantasy, but I think at this point I'm not smart enough to do the story I want to do. I have it in my head. I've been working on it. It's been marinating, but I'm not skill-wise there yet. The other thing I'd love to do is like a set of like contemporary queer romances set around a craft show. Like especially like in my state, we have like the oh, I can't think of what it's called. It's like, you remember the show Oddities? It's like the Oddities Fair or the Oddities like craft show. So I would love to write like a set of like contemporary romances set around sort of an oddities gothic craft fair.
I love that answer because the story that I first like started really writing was meant to be a fantasy. And as I was writing it, I realized that I was too dumb to keep all of that in my head. So it morphed into like a contemporary romance, but I was like, one day, maybe I'll figure out the fantasy part of it. Speaking of fantasy, Amber, you're next.
Well, I have two. One, like, I have this concept of just writing a whole series of novellas that are just cozy, like coffee house romances, like just your feel good fluff that's like literally nothing more than just feel good fluff. I think that would just be really fun. But the only thing is with that is I couldn't just kill off all my characters, so I don't know like how that would work. Which on the opposite end of that, I think writing a horror thriller with like supernatural elements would be super fun. Like, yeah, like where you have like gods and like ghosts and like stuff like literally haunting like probably I would want to do like a YA, like Jurassic Park meets Hunger Games with horror twist. I think would just be super fun just to play with all those different things that you could do with that.
Amber just really likes traumatizing her readers. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, so there's two questions that I'm going to kind of combine. What is a book that is currently on your TBR list and or a book that you think everyone should read? I think we're at Jen.
Shameless plug for my very best friend's book, Thirsty by Jez Hammonds. It just came out and it's again like borderline YA adult, but it's about a girl who's resting a sorority and finds that like when she's drinking, she's a lot more fun and she feels accepted and is just like it's her coping mechanism. And, as she gets deeper into this process, it starts to spiral and she starts to realize like she's losing herself entirely. And I think it's just such an important book. First of all, it's beautifully written. It's very queer. It's Black. It's just everything I love about Jez's writing, just perfect prose. But it's also, I just feel like alcohol in this country is just so normalized and, I drink and like, I'm not anti-drinking or anything, but I think just like really digging into the why of it could save a lot of people a lot of pain. And I think this book just gorgeously goes through this thought process of like, why do I even drink? And when do I want to drink? And who does that make me? And I just really wish I had it when I was younger. So I feel like it's something everybody should read, whether you're like a young adult and it's perfect for people who are about to go to college too, because that's when the pressure I think is like the highest, right? It's like, if you don't do this, you're just like not in this space and you're not in this club and you're not a part of this friend group. So it's also very like, there's so much lightness and humor and joy in the book. So it's not a super heavy read in that way, but I think it's so important and it's just really, really well written and I love it. And so Thirsty by Jazz Hammonds.
Kara?
So I just finished, like probably earlier in the week, The House of the Red Balconies by A.J. Demas. If you don't know A.J. Demas's work, most of her stories take place in sort of a fictionalized, like ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and typically feature queer characters. And I was really excited for this one because one of the main characters is chronically ill, and he's sort of a I can't think of a good example, like a courtesan almost. Like he works like a tea house and he does entertainment. And he is sort of dealing with this and kind of struggling with it. And the other main character comes in and he's just so sweet and so loving and just so supportive and trying to do things for him that like makes life better. So, trying to figure out how we can have a life together where we're on sort of equal footing and you're able to have your health and your job and enjoy yourself and we can be, together. And I just thought it was really, really sweet. And it's pretty short. It's only like, I think about 200 pages. So for my people who like short books, it's perfect. And I think it's coming out the 24th of June.
Amber?
So once again, I have forgotten every other book that exists. But I guess I'll just give a shout out to one of my book besties' books that I absolutely love. And that is Blood Hunted by Ariel Ray. It is a dark fantasy. It's the first in a series. There are two and a half. Well, there's two books coming out. The third one in the trilogy is coming out soon. And then there is a like Why Choose in there. And the books aren't necessarily like marketed as queer, but there are a lot of queer characters in it just existing. And once again, it's one of those worlds where it's just a very queer normative world, but it's just a very well written series. It does have some darker themes. It follows a woman, well, she was a girl. She accidentally opened the door to like fairy and let in all these fae, and because of the magic behind the whole thing, the fae are basically invincible and she's the only one that can kill them. So it's a very also like sex positive book. There's like no shame there at all, and it's just all done in just a very, very good way of just there's all these aspects of adventure, and there's a little bit of like enemies to reluctant allies to a little bit more, and it's just a fun story. And yeah, like I said, I've literally forgotten like every other book that exists, but if you like that kind of stuff and just want more of just that positive, that's like sex positive and just queer normative, it's a good book. It's a fun time.
Dom?
A book that I read recently that I just would, it's like, how do you write like this? Was Byron Lane's The Big Gay Wedding. Is it The Big Gay? I think it's just Big Gay Wedding. Byron Lane is, and I hate to describe him like this, I'm sure he's sick of it, but he is Stephen Rowley's husband. And Stephen Rowley wrote The Guncle and The Celebrants and the editor. And so I met Stephen at a book festival, and I knew that I would be seeing both him and his husband Byron at a next book festival at Tucson. So I decided I was going to read Byron's book, and I thought, oh no, it's like I was afraid it was going to suck, right? Because what am I going to say when I meet both of them? And how do you tell a person that you read your book but you didn't enjoy it as much as their partners? But it was absolutely, I don't want to say it's the opposite. I still love Stephen Rowley's books, but like Byron is just an incredible, incredible writer. He was also the personal assistant to Carrie Fisher. So, and I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I'm like, this is super cool. But it is just, I don't think I've ever laughed and cried that much at a book. He has this way of writing humor that it's so smart, and it's so just like every character just has these amazing like it's just like the humor is like this. And then at the end, it's this big all of out of nowhere, you start just sobbing. It's just such an emotional, like, it puts you through the ringer. And it was so fantastic. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we're running low on time, so I'm going to end this by asking each of you what is coming next. I know some of you have projects that are coming soon, and maybe some are a little bit more secret, but whatever you're able or willing to share now about what you have coming next, I would love to hear it. Very selfishly, because I love all of you. So we'll start with Kara.
Sorry, I lost track of who was next. The book I'm currently working on is The Reanimator's Remains, which is the third book in my Reanimator mystery series, and that should be coming out October 29th. And it'll be an ebook, paperback, etc. when it comes out. But what it is my two main characters, Oliver, who is a autistic necromancer, and his partner, who is an undead, accidentally reanimated detective, are going off to solve a mystery. And this time it is actually where Oliver was born, and he wants to find out more about his family because he was orphaned pretty young. And when he goes back there, it turns out his birthplace is a murder town where weird things happen. And his partner is not thrilled to be there. And yeah, we get to learn a whole lot more about his backstory, as well as some slightly traumatizing things about his partner's backstory as well. So I'm putting my poor boys through the ringer this time.
Speaking of trauma, Amber, you're up next.
First, I just want to say I'm really looking forward to Kara's book because that's one of my favorite series. So like I'm really looking forward to that next book. But my next thing that's coming out is it's my romantasy. It's the first in a duology. It's called Between Fate and Failure. Um, and it follows a well, not young, she's 19, a girl from a farming village who was never meant to be queen, the prince she's engaged to, who's afraid to love again, and the broody, morally gray assassin who's charged to protect them from a magic-hating cult who wants to kill them all. And it's just got a lot of fun romantasy elements in it and just regular fantasy elements. And I refuse to confirm officially whether or not it ends in the duology will actually end in a throuple or not, because I need to, leave people guessing. And so that actually comes out July 30th. So that's basically like done. Pre-orders are open, and I'm working on the second book in the duology and finishing up all of that. So those are my main things that are coming up.
I have been very lucky and I have read this and it is so good, y'all. I'm very excited for everybody to read it. I also will fight anybody who does not love Bash. I will state this now. Next up is Dominic.
Yeah, so Karaoke Queen is coming out in September. It's my sophomore book, and it is about a ex drag queen who runs into his ex-boyfriend at a bar in Oakland and decides to try to win him back by putting on a drag karaoke show at the bar to like rustle up business. The problem is Rex, who's the main character, stopped doing drag because of a traumatic incident, and doesn't want anyone to know that he is Regina. So it's a full-on rom-com where he's trying to, it's like Tootsie, he doesn't want anyone to know his true identity. So basically he enlists a frenemy to be his doppelganger and trains the frenemy to be a drag queen, and in the process kind of starts to fall in love with him because this person reminds him of how amazing and it is to be beautiful and femme, and like how amazing and gorgeous that is. So there's sort of a love triangle anyway, but you just have to read to find out.
All right, and Jen.
I love all of these. Like every single one, I've been like, I need this immediately. So, thank you. No, I just turned in a first draft of the first half of my second book. And I'm sure it's going to change a lot, but it's essentially about some teens from today, one of whom is the main character and is questioning like, are they non-binary? Are they trans? Are they, somewhere, where on the spectrum do they fall? And it shouldn't matter, except they have a field hockey scholarship for college and they're not sure they want to go through with the next 4 years living in a way that doesn't feel comfortable to them. And they go to prom with their girlfriend, they get in a big fight, there's a storm, and they end up at this house in the middle of the woods, where they slowly realize time stands still, and there's all these kids from the 1920s through the 1990s living there, hiding from time and their lives, and creating this little queer utopia, which is the perfect found family story until suddenly time starts running again. So it's my way of exploring queer history and like, what it even means to be a person living in the world, living outside of the world, living in the in-between and finding people who kind of get you, even if the world doesn't. So still a work in progress. I'm sure it's going to change a lot, but I'm very just like having the best time exploring it.
I need all of these right now. I'm very excited for all of these. I hope all of y'all are excited who are watching. And if you haven't already read any of these amazing authors' books, what are you waiting for? They are available. They have books available now that you can go into a bookstore and get, or you can go onto the internet and buy. It's really exciting how we can buy things on the internet now, guys. I love it. I want to say thank you to all of my panelists for being here with me today. I know it was kind of a scramble to get us all together, but I'm so grateful that y'all were here. I want to give a shout out to Matthew Hubbard, who unfortunately had to withdraw, but we miss him, we love him, and we can't wait to see what he does next as well. Thank you to our audience members for being here, having awesome questions, and happy Pride, everybody. We're still in the midst of Pride Month, so let's keep celebrating and let's keep reminding people. Again, we are here and we're queer, and y'all just need to get used to it because we're not going anywhere, okay? We're not. Thank you guys again so much. I really appreciate it. And shameless self-plug here. If you are a podcast listener, I happen to have one. It is called The Incoherent Fangirl, hence the title of this whole panel. You can find us wherever you stream your podcast, and we would love to hear from you. And I'm sure we will have some of y'all join us on the podcast soon. I'm not saying names or anything, but it'll probably happen. Thank you guys again. I appreciate you, and have a great day. Have a great Pride Month, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.